Thank you very much for having me. First time I've been here and down that way a little bit with the Hutt Valley Motorsport Club. And I think this went there once when it was maybe, there wasn't much to it. I think it might have been a chassis with maybe 2 corners of suspension on it. So a fair while ago now. But it's been finished for a while, a couple of years now. Just sitting around in the workshop, not allowed to do anything. So, obviously a sore point with Motorsport New Zealand, but I've tried, and at least they let production EVs race now, so that just seemed a lot easier. And so yeah, this hasn't really done a lot, and so I will take any opportunity here, really. So yeah.
You excluded from
Yeah.
Hill climbs?
Everything.
Anything in Motorsport New Zealand?
Yeah.
Why?
Doesn't
Yeah, no,
doesn't make the rules.
some drag racing too. Well, won't even run.
All EVs or just scratch built things?
I think it's scratch built ones.
Yeah.
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 Throw training that
Yeah.
get you along with that.
Yeah. I am very interested. I think it's I mean, it has a runtime of sub 2 minutes, so I've never really been that interested in taking Manfield, even on the few days that it can go, which is your days. But it gets so little use that I'll give it a shot this time round and see what happens. So I guess the I used to have a Nissan Pulsar, heaps of power, front wheel drive, turbo, all the good stuff. And I think the main motivation behind building this was really that it's my job. I'm an EV mechanic. That is to say, I have an EV qualification that not a lot of people have, but 90+% of my work is still normal ICE cars, just because of fleet size, obviously. But yeah, it was more just a sort of a self-promotion thing, really. And we all know that when done right, EVs are pretty formidable in hill climbs. So that was kind of the goal. It hasn't panned out that way, but I'm sure if there ever was a room of people that are used to things not really going according to plan, it's probably you guys. So I'm sure you'll forgive all of the very deliberate design changes that have happened throughout the process. First and only car I've built. Probably won't build another one because it was fucking horrible. I enjoyed the first year, but after that, it very much became unenjoyable and just a desperate race to try and get finished, which lasted 3 extra years that I really didn't need or want. And now it's here, and it's not allowed to do anything, so not really sure where I'm going with this. Don't build electric cars, especially not for motorsport use. I would have had a much easier time, ironically, getting this registered for the road if it had been built with that in mind from the start. I always knew it was going to be a little bit difficult with Motorsport New Zealand because it was started before the EV rigs were released. I did think that they were going to be released quite soon after starting it, but they took years and years, and to be out, I'd be so far behind the ball that I wouldn't be finished now if I'd waited. And to be honest, if I'd waited, I probably never would have built it because I would have seen how ridiculous they are and that it was completely unattainable. I started early and now I have a car, even though it can't really do a lot.
Would you consider building a motorbike version?
Consider selling the drivetrain out of it and putting a bike motor in it, but I mean, I don't know.
Oh, no, I mean, ride a motorbike, race it like they do overseas.
Oh, build an electric motorbike?
Yeah,
No,
they seem to go pretty quick.
absolutely not. No, I have no interest in any form of motorbike. Period.
I take it you would have taken notice of Pikes Peak recently, which had a EV section.
Has done for over 10 years.
Yeah.
It's one of the pioneering events that really allowed EVs in sort of full competition spec.
And a fair few of them look to be home built.
No home-built EVs at Pikes Peak.
Or at least they weren't series production vehicles.
Oh, definitely not series production. But yeah, I mean, the Ford EV truck that won it this year, I mean, I don't even know what you call it. You know, a factory special vehicle.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's just basically no rules at Pikes Peak, really. If it's safe, you can drive it. Yeah, I really don't know what the rules are there. I think they're very heavy on roll cage stuff, but I'm not sure electrically. But also, if it's being built by Ford, it's going to be safe. I mean, if you didn't know, that particular vehicle which won Pikes Peak this year stopped on track for over 20 seconds and still won. Driven by Roman Demar, who obviously holds the record in the Volkswagen IDR, which is also electric, who sort of, in one interview about the Ford truck that sort of someone was talking about, they said, you're used to going 9 seconds, and he just laughed and said, I've done under 8, and so 9 is nothing these days. Sorry, I've lost track of where we were going with that. Yeah, Pikes Peak, no problem, much less strict than here. The long story short really is with that, Motorsport have just used an unedited FIA document about electrical safety. So essentially it means that if you want to build a scratch-built car, it has to meet the same rules that a Formula One car or a hypercar would. There's just no editing to make it more appropriate for sort of local use or anything. So, yeah.
What you're going to change that? Do you think? Is there anyone?
Direction, in my personal experience. There's 3 known electric scratch-built cars in the country, Motorsport New Zealand, Hayden Cadden's car, obviously, a particularly ugly Lotus 7 type thing in Invercargill, which has a restricted logbook, which I'm not 100% sure what that means, but it definitely means that someone affiliated with Motorsport New Zealand has looked at it and said that it's okay, which is a lot further than I've been able to get with them. And I suspect whoever looked at it probably lives in Invercargill. But yeah, just an absolute dead end, really. They won't come and they actually don't like about it, and it wears on you quite quickly.
So this looks pretty sophisticated, suspension wise, everything. Do you want to walk us through the journey with design and what you were trying to achieve and thinking about it?
Yeah, cool. Great question. Sorry, I'm probably better at answering questions than just yabbering. Chassis-wise, super simple, really. It's all 100% original, with a little bit of inspiration from Malik and a little bit from Lotus, but there's not really a lot that goes with the chassis of, a home-built car. Without a body, it just looks like a bed frame, really. Suspension, definitely a very different story. Again, less sophisticated, whether or not it all sort of works is yet to be determined because this hasn't really had any runtime. It feels pretty good. But yeah, there were a lot of those unplanned design changes in the suspension department. The only stuff that really got sort of CAD designed or even really designed all that much before being built were specific components. So nothing of the car was assembled in any form of CAD program or anything. So there was a lot of trial and error in terms of suspension arms and rockers and stuff, which I know in this day and age isn't necessarily the most effective way to go about things, but I'd still be learning CAD if I'd chosen to go down that route. So there is quite a lot of stuff on it that's had CAD involvement, but it may have, if I already knew how to use CAD, it probably would have saved a lot of time with the suspension design. And that was basically because I copied the top arms from Tim Soleil's Malik, and that was probably the biggest mistake I made in the whole car because they're just way too short, and that really messed with a lot of other stuff in the car. Most specifically because even though it's a sort of a sports car looking thing, being a hill climb car that's not, well, that was never going to be like aero dependent. It was supposed to have quite a lot more suspension travel than a sports car would normally have. Short top arms are not the best way to get lots of suspension travel, as it turns out. But got there in the end. It's still probably got a bit more suspension travel than a Malik. I'll take the body off and stuff afterwards, and you can see it. It's all there. But yeah.
Why is it a chain drive?
There was a good reason for that. The steering rack. Yep, that's why. So it makes no difference to me what side of the car I'm on.
And what is the drive car? Is it rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive?
So it was designed to be all-wheel drive for independent motors, and so the front subframe, but basically, yeah, from the front bulkhead forwards and rear bulkhead backwards, the car is identical. Well, the bulkheads are identical, and that was designed around having two big motors in each one and a chain drive, which I've got a bunch of old stuff flying around that you can look at later, but this was one of the first drive frames that had, originally the motors weren't mounted on these, and so it had a big sprocket there with an axle sticking out of it and a small sprocket there and a motor, and so it was all designed around having two of those in each end, and an axle, obviously. The first motors that I bought were, in hindsight, a bit too optimistic. So it was going to have 4 of those in it.
You pinched it out of a washing machine.
Yeah, it's pretty much, yeah. No, and it's just a dirty big off-the-shelf brushless motor and controller that people use for stuff like huge drones or people strap into their backs and jump in a parachute and go for a fly.
What sort of power rating are you talking about?
Oh, no, don't get me started. They were supposed to be 50 kilowatts each at, absolute limit. No idea what they what they would or could actually make. I did get 2 of them mounted in the car and try driving it, and it did sort of drive. It wouldn't self-start though because they're position sensors in the motor. So with a push start, it did go, but I didn't really spend a lot of time seeing how well it would go. Needing a push start obviously was not practical, so I wasn't too upset that those motors didn't work because I knew it was pretty, I knew it was pretty optimistic right from the start. Which brings us to where I did get really upset, which was with the motors that are in the car at the moment, because they were a lot more expensive, and as far as I was concerned, I was buying a reputable product from a reputable and the cost made me feel like it was a safe bet, but they still ended up making half the power that was advertised, which remains to this day to be an extremely sore point because the last almost 12 months of the build was basically the car being completely finished and me just trying to find the extra 25 kilowatts per motor that I was promised, and it never arrived. Yeah, you'll be able to see what's in there. Oh, that's what I was going to show you. So these are the prototype versions of what's in there at the moment as far as the drivetrain goes. So it's got the new motor soldered on there, and same thing, big old chain leading to an axle. And there's 2 of those sitting in the back, which you can see from there, but I'll take the whole body off later and you'll be able to see it all quite clearly. Pretty simple.
So 200 kilowatts. What voltage are you running these at?
200 kilowatts?
Well, that's what I had.
Sorry, 50 per motor. And
Oh, right, yeah, right. So it was supposed to be 50 per corner, so it's supposed to be 200. No, 48.
Oh.
So it's only got motors in the back at the moment. So half that to start. Yeah. So 48 kilowatts total.
And you're running that at how many volts?
120.
Okay.
Yeah. Move on from that because I get very sad very quickly when I talk about how much power it doesn't make.
Sorry, you were able to isolate it to the motor, so it wasn't your
No.
Okay.
People claim that they've made more power with those motors and different controllers. People also claim that they've made more power with those controllers and different motors. And so not able to isolate it to anything and left to draw the conclusion that it's probably just false advertising.
Is that regenerative braking or?
It can do. It doesn't really run it at the moment. I'm not sure why, actually. Yeah, not sure why. It does have it, but I don't use it.
Well, the hill pump would be unnecessarily really.
Brake balance, yeah. Brake balance in electric cars, especially electric racing cars, is extremely difficult to achieve. When you've got regen working on not all of the same wheels that have brakes on them, it becomes to be electronically controlled. And there was no way that this car was ever going to have an electronically controlled braking system. So, yeah. And as it was, when I first built the car, I clearly bought the wrong piston sizes for the calipers and the rear wheels locked up before the front ones, so that was pretty shitty. I tried putting I think it had the grippiest wheelwood pads all round, so I put the worst wheelwood pads I could find, and it was still a bit like that. So I bought new calipers for the front, I think, that had more appropriate piston sizes. Now it's great. But yeah, just another reason that it's not really in a position to mix electronic braking with mechanical braking.
Where have you tried the car out? Obviously, you've driven it somewhere, so you just out the front of your house, and you've no one driving around. What do you do?
I live on I live on Murray Road in Normandale, so I would fucking love to drive it up my road. But no. I mean, yeah, honestly, the answer is not a lot, really. I've done the Mount Vic hill climb in it, which allegedly turned out to be something that I wasn't cleared to do. And I've done the Port Road Street Sprint in it.
Remember the times? You got it? 'Cause you were quite quick, as I recall.
I think it, no, I don't. Hutt Valley Motorsport Club did what they were supposed to do and didn't publish times for a demonstration run. The Wellington Car Club did publish a time, which I think was part of why they got in trouble. No, I can't really remember. Somewhere around mid-pack, which is pretty good for a 48 kilowatt car. But
You know, it's kind of like 0 to 60 or any sorts of specs on it. Or
yeah, they're all really disappointing. 0 to 60 in somewhere between 7 and 8. I used to know to the 100th of a second because that's how disappointed I was about it. Yeah, there's actually a particularly cheesy and dramatic documentary about the first test day, which was at the Masterton Motorplex, that a friend made for me, which was quite fun. That was the purpose of that day, was just to get a top speed in the 0 to 60, really. And that was pretty much the first time I'd really been able to drive it properly. And it was, I don't know, it was a fun day. It was pretty disappointing. That was the day that I also learned that despite having a maximum RPM of 6,000, the motors make no torque whatsoever over 3,000. And so, yeah, that was pretty sucky, finding out that I sort of only had 3,000 RPM of actual power to play with. What it had sort of led to on the day was an extremely low top speed, because I was expecting it to still be making power at 6,000 RPM, which it definitely didn't. And it then geared way too low because it sort of stopped accelerating it. The graph from the first day was crazy. It was like the first, I think, up to about 60 k's an hour. And then it just absolutely hit a brick wall, and I think it took like maybe 2 seconds to get to 60 k's an hour, and then another 6 seconds to get to 100 or something. It was, yeah. I mean, I sort of took that in my stride, and I was like, right, I just need to change the gear ratio, which I did. And then I thought I would, at that point, I was still confident that changing settings in the controllers would yield more power or a wider usable rev range. So I wasn't particularly discouraged at that point. I felt like it was just what the first testing day was supposed to be. But nothing really worked out from that point onwards. It has remained limited at that power with only 3,000 RPM of really sort of yeah.
how long does it take to charge the battery?
Can get it, so I can do at the events that it's done. It's sort of done a run, which at Port Road is about 80 seconds of driving. At Mount Vic, it's a lot less, maybe 50, and can get it charged in the time that it takes between the next runs, which is an hour and a bit, using the extremely fancy off-board charger, which does a decent job. It's all pretty sort of bodged at this point because even with, I mean, again, it wasn't the first charger it had a much smaller and bodgier charger to start with, and that was the sort of the second one that I got, which is heaps better, but you still just never really know how it's going to go. But thankfully that did work pretty well. So yeah, it charges pretty quickly, but also goes flat pretty quickly, which is deliberate. That's not a design error. It was a lot of time went into basically trying to find a drivetrain that would be able to deliver as much power as it could for only around 2 minutes, which is why EVs typically are heavier than petrol cars, a big battery, and even though the technology gets better and the batteries get lighter per range or whatever, if you still, if you're trying to make something as light as possible, you're always going to have to be very specific around what you want or need your range to be. So, yeah, I chose this route and have ended up with a car that's 450 kilos, which is pretty light. Yeah, that's at the expense of runtime, obviously. But
What's your battery pack?
Yeah, I have a feeling that this lid might actually only be taped on, and so could probably take that lid off and have a gaze in there afterwards if you want. But the batteries are, I think I've got one of them around radio control car LiPos. Yeah.
There'd be a spicy pillow. It's spicy pillow in there.
A spicy pillow.
And as you'll find, one will expand.
Maybe. I'm pretty confident that no matter what happens inside that 6mm aluminium box, it's not going to affect me. So, that's kind of the whole Motorsport New Zealand thing. Like, if they took a minute to look at it, like, I think the total capacity of that battery is something like times less than the shittiest Nissan Leaf. So, it's a small battery. Even if it has the worst fire it can possibly have, it's still not a huge amount of energy to expend. I don't think it's going to burn through 6mm aluminium.
You run a generator to the charger, or you charge it up in straight?
So both of the events that it's run at, I've been able to just plug into mains power. Yeah, would if I needed to. But and sort of ironically, if it were allowed to run, or even in the case of a production car, there are special event requirements for EVs, and probably the biggest one really is that if you've got like a street fire hydrant within, I think, 400 metres of the event, then you don't need any water on site for hypothetical fire extinguishing. But if you don't, you need like an impractical amount of water, like 4 water tankers worth. And so it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that it doesn't get used anywhere, even vaguely rural. And so, yeah, neither off-site charging nor big water tankers have been required for anything yet.
What's your boiler and how did you build that building?
Yeah, great question. I did not build it. That's probably the thing on the car that almost, not accidentally, but just fortunately worked out the best. The car was going to be much, much uglier than what it is now. For a period of time, it had a mallet nose cone on it, like Tim's car, and some. I mean, to be fair, the side pods on this are pretty boxy, but they've got some curve that had like just bent sheet aluminium side pod. Absolutely no idea what was going to happen rear of the roll hoop. Probably nothing. So yeah, it was going to be real ugly. And then I can't even remember how we found them, but my boss and I found a Trade Me listing for two of these rather obscure 3/4-ish scale on a Ferrari 333 SV bodies that some old dude had had in a paddock for like 20 years and had realised that he was now too old and sick to build a sports car. And so we got two of these complete fucking bodies for $1,000. And one of them's on the wall at work in case I smash this one, and this one's on the car. It has been, you probably don't even need to look that closely, it's been extended a little bit to make it sort of fit, and it's originally quite different. Originally the cockpit ends there, and it's got a sort of a big sort of scoop thing, but had to be hacked up and stuff to just sort of make the whole thing fit. Like in that car, you wouldn't have had, well, there wouldn't have been provision for two electric motors in the sort of the front section, and so your feet would go right into the amputation zone. Whereas, because, like I said before, the front and rear of the car are designed to have motors in them, I'm right in the middle, which sort of means that I'm back. Yeah, initially I was sort of quite tentative about hacking up this really nice fiberglass body, but it's now in. So the front bit's solid until there, and then it's got two hatches on the side. The rear guards come off separately just for convenience, and then a motor cover. So it's well and truly butchered now, but yeah, really, really pleased that we found those. Yeah, I think it looks great too.
What sort of weight distribution?
That's a good question. I have weighed it before on corner weight scales with me in it. It's a bit tail heavy because I'm more in the back and are in the back, and there are none in the front. Yeah, it's a bit tail heavy, but not by a crazy amount, I don't think. Yeah, can't quite remember. Definitely not 50-50, although it would have been much closer to traditional motors in the front. And there is space in there to move the battery pack around and stuff for that. Just sort of haven't got there yet. Incidentally, it was, I mean, yeah, the fact that those motors didn't make as much power as they were supposed to is why I didn't then go and spend another $15,000 on two more of them for the front. It didn't seem like the right way to go. I had actually designed the new drivetrain for it, which realistically will probably never happen now because I'm moving to Australia within the next 6 months and they don't like EVs either. So any of you guys want the world's most useless home-built car, or potentially a you've got one? Oh, you've all got them already. So I'm either talking to the right crowd or the wrong crowd. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with it at this point, but the new drivetrain was going to be a lot simpler, and with the wisdom of hindsight, probably what I should have done right from the beginning, but there were good reasons that I didn't do it. Firstly, because it's mechanically particularly boring, and secondly, because at the time you could not easily get an aftermarket computer to run a Leaf drivetrain out of a Leaf, and they also didn't make 160 kilowatt Leafs back then. And so yeah, you can now get an inverter from any of the 2019 onwards Leafs with the biggest batteries, and they 60 kilowatts. And the motor from any Leaf from 2013 onwards, they're all the same, all capable of 160 kilowatts. Just earlier ones only had 80 or then 110 inverters. So you can pretty easily get 160 motor package up and running these days for not a lot of money, which is a bit of a game changer, really. I haven't seen a huge amount of cool projects utilising it, but there are now at least 3 companies making ECUs to run the drivetrain out of the car. 2 of them New Zealand companies, which seems unusual, but works out.
What would you keep your license plate given to you can do what you like?
I mean,
What was they using, so a lot of resources have gone into developing these,
yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine for what?
That's a car.
Yeah, EV conversion to the road,
Right.
which, yeah, again, like I said before, ironically, normally it's easier to do motorsport shit because there's less rules, but in this case, it would have been sort of easier to build something for the road, and 160 kilowatt Leaf motor in a car that's not a Leaf would be pretty epic.
You could do that in Austin.
Australia even less EV friendly than New Zealand.
Using my road car.
Oh, I know nothing about the regulations for. I think they're pretty strict in a lot of places. A lot of places you're not even allowed to do much to normal cars. Or at least that was what I got from reading like Performance Car magazine. Even 20 years ago, it sounded like it was a lot harder to sort of meaningfully modify.
Whereabouts was it?
Melbourne. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, so I have no idea what's going to happen with this, really. Either storage or it'd been nice if the museum found it interesting enough to hold on to it for a while, but I won't be surprised if they don't. But yeah, so I was like just about to sort of pull the trigger on the new drivetrain, and then Motorsport New Zealand sort of gave me a glimmer of hope that they might be warming to letting it run as is, which turned out to be just another dead end, really. Yeah.
Has anyone tried doing away with drivetrain and have a motor in each corner? Like our Latuno did that with the big earth moving.
What it was designed for.
Hey?
That's what it was designed for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a big hole in the front for 2 more motors.
So four motors, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have any drive shafts and all that.
Yeah, totally. And I hope none of you are going to ask me what I do. Hopefully you're all smart enough to know that it just doesn't need one when it's got 2 independently driven rear wheels.
So why doesn't it make it up?
How does it go from the motor sprocket to the wheel? It's like a CV joint or what?
Yeah, just
I see it, okay. So the sprocket of the motor drives the bigger sprocket that's attached to a CV joint.
it's all pretty, yeah, I'll pull the panels off afterwards and you'll see it. It's probably imagining. Yeah, nice and simple. It was originally designed to not need any kind of chain tensioning device, which I thought was genius at the time, until the drive ratio that it was designed for turned out to be too low, and I had to change that. And so it does have a chain tensioner now. But the original concept was solid. It didn't have a tensioner, and it was perfect. It was so good. Yeah. Chains are funny things. Everyone expects it to be quite quiet, and it is not. It's really loud, which is cool. I think if it was really quiet, it would just be, another easy target for people to, people who are sort of predisposed to not liking electric cars or not really wanting them in motorsport for whatever reason to latch onto, but I guess it makes some noise. So, yeah.
You talked a little bit about the fact of the time with as a motorsport and your regulations and your own timeline kind of didn't match up. Have you been put off making another car in the future completely?
100%.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No chance at all?
I mean, never say never, but I've actively discouraged other people from taking on a similar project at the moment. I've appreciated their coming to me with questions, but I could not in good faith tell them that I thought it was a worthwhile endeavour at this time. Yeah.
Yeah, even if it wasn't Aussie or New Zealand, like I know US, China, the Wild West.
Oh no, totally. If there's a likelihood that they're going to be able to use the thing in a meaningful way, then by all means. But I mean, again, like I don't know if any of you guys have built a car that's never actually, been able to meet the rules. I'm sure you've all. I don't know. I'm sure some of you have built cars that have never reached completion, but whether that was, whether that was due to just hitting a brick wall with regulations and not really being able to work around it at all, it's extremely demoralizing. Yeah.
Just open question.
There's no more chance of this car causing a shock or a fire than most of the other pieces of shit that do hill climbs. Like, there's some pretty rough cars out there, and if safety is the genuine reason, then most of those other petrol cars don't have to race either. Like, I'm not quite in the same camp as Tim Soleil in terms of do whatever you want. If I die, it's my well, I sort of am, but it seems like he's actively trying to die. He's a bit looser on where he would sort of place the ideal balance of risk versus safety. But yeah, really, if they were to take the same sort of approach that they are taking with this, then petrol cars wouldn't be allowed to race either.
I do agree with you because I think we've all seen in public press even instances of car fires, EV car fires that cannot be put out.
Yeah.
Water. So
yeah.
Kind of like what WTF really. Yeah. Okay.
And WTF in terms of like you lost me on the point of that.
I was quite surprised when you said one of the requirements was to have 4 tankers full of water.
Yeah.
What's the point of having water for an EV? It really needs to be put out with something that will smother it.
You can't put it out.
Or at least
The point of the water is just to reduce heat, and so once a lithium battery catches fire, which does not happen very often, despite how many times you might see it in the papers. I urge you to consider how many times you see things about petrol cars burning in the papers. Never, but they still do it. They just don't get brought to your attention because no one cares. So you can't put them out if a lithium battery really catches fire, but it's still deemed beneficial to try and reduce some of the heat, I guess, or at least to stop it spreading to trees and stuff.
It's just that I always thought it's just like you said, stop heating. If it's in there, something drag it away, so put it somewhere it's can burn for the rest of its life.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, which is sort of why I don't really understand why motorsport circuits would be so against it. Really, like drag it onto the midfield and let it burn.
Get the marshmallow like that.
Yeah.
you've got to feed the market somehow.
Not having to go at you saying he's been able to do it way of you, but just have you talked to Hank Pepper about how he's, yeah, was it? Yeah, just money,
that car's worth over $2 million. Is the short and long answer to that.
That's fair, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, in terms of fighting motorsport in New Zealand, have you got an easier method, or is it just throwing lawyers at them, or what?
Nothing needed. They're there to support him because he's a national sporting hero and he's building a car to the absolute top level of specification. So there was never going to be any problems with it meeting the rules. It does meet the rules, but I don't think it's a particularly realistic yardstick to apply to people such as us.
I don't know if you've seen in the last couple of weeks, but most people in New Zealand had a massive personnel change.
Oh yeah.
So a whole bunch of things have changed, not your policy-wise, but things are moving around it, but you know, who your confidence previously, things might change, management have changed, may well change as well.
We can only hope. They have been getting better over the last 4 years, but to put that into context, still not good enough for them to make any meaningful gesture towards helping me get this approved. I was talking to Steve, before, and I've been asking them for years to just come look at it and tell me what they don't like about it, and it hasn't happened yet. They even sort of, I even said, you know, what is the process of deeming whether this car meets the regulations or not? And they literally had no answer for a couple of years, and eventually came up with, we'll get someone from LTV to look at it. And they said that Marty was one of the people that could do LTV certs for electric road cars, so he would do it. And I asked Marty, and they hadn't spoken to him at all about it. And he also said that he didn't know what their rules were, because they said they would get someone from LVV who had the electrical cert to do electric road cars to look at it, but inspect it to their rules, which, just, they said it, but it's obviously not a process that's actually in place and able to be used. So, yeah, just very frustrating.
From another perspective, I know that recently had a big workshop on EVs conversions, and is looking at moving forward with the rules and regulations, the landscape change.
Yeah.
I don't know the outcome of that is yet, but certainly, had a meeting of a whole bunch of people with experience. Quite recently
To tell you what I think of that, I asked to be there and I wasn't there, and so it seems pretty similar to how Motorsport New Zealand didn't ask me to participate in any discussions about their rules either. That is to say, largely tokenistic and not actually likely to yield a result that's all that good for anyone actually involved. I don't think there's anyone in Wellington that works on more EVs per day than me, and so I feel like I probably should have been at that discussion, and I wasn't.
On a different note, what are you going to do in the street?
Don't know. You mean in general?
Oh, just work, or what, you going for family, or why are you going?
I've got a lot of friends over there. I used to live in Christchurch, and when the earthquakes happened there was a fairly mass exodus to Melbourne, and a lot of my friends still live over there, and I just never went at the time, and now I'm going to.
Right.
So,
Just the country.
Yeah. Don't know what I'll do for work over there. Again, I think even in road car terms, they're pretty behind, pretty behind New Zealand on where they're at with EV road cars in terms of uptake. So there's a chance that there might be a garage looking to be the EV garage in the same way that Thompson Automotive was 5 years ago here, for I mean, all their trams are electric over there. It's probably, well, there's definitely way better money in trams and trains than there is in cars, but who knows whether I'll enjoy something like that. Yeah, don't know. Something to do with being an electric vehicle mechanic, but not sure what vehicle. Yeah. And I have no idea what the racing scene's like over there. So I'll find out. They literally went backwards on EVs. They did allow them for a period. There was a guy regularly competing, I don't know where in Australia, but there's a guy over there with a scratch-built EV and he did a bunch of events and then just got shit canned overnight and no more. Yeah.
Right, any more questions, or can we send this thing naked?
Oh yeah. There's also, feel free to have a rummage through. A bunch of random 3D printed and prototype stuff that that mostly was on the car for some period of time. You see many iterations of things. I think that's the jig that spaced the distance between the rocker mount and the shock mount. Very technical.